So Matt, I was wondering, could you introduce yourself to the channel and maybe tell us, where did your passion come from to get into agriculture?
Yeah, so I'm Matt Powers. I'm an author, an educator. I'm a former high school teacher, and I am a permaculture gardener, seed saver, farmer. And I became a citizen scientist in recent years. And the real source of the reason I got into gardening, I mean, when I was young, my mom gardened and like the grandmas gardened, and like I was in New England, and so obviously it wasn't like like a wild, amazing place to garden in comparison to like California or Florida, and you know what I mean? And it was, Connecticut. So it was right outside of the city. So that wasn't a focus with anyone. So that's what I grew up with. And I wanted to be a bass player. And that's what I did. What happened was my wife got cancer and she lost her thyroid. We did the ablation. So there's this nuclear isotope of iodine, like iodine 132, I believe, and it eats away your thyroid, and you're radioactive for 6 months and can damage everyone's thyroid around you or touches your trash. So you have to collect it for 6 months. And so my wife was in the third floor of where I grew up. We all the boys lived in the third floor, and so we actually went back to my mom's house. It was like a terrible time period in my life, and so we had we were afraid for our newborn baby to be around. So he was with her sister in Brooklyn, and so that was just like a terrible strain. And she got cancer immediately, like 3 months later, and it was almost to her lymph nodes. And once it gets to your lymph nodes, it can go anywhere. And then that's when like it becomes the like unstoppable problem. And so she like almost died and then almost died again. And then when I brought it up, because like, just think about this for a second. This pill that they took to ablate their thyroid made them radioactive for 6 months, such that their trash, their Kleenex, or rag wiping the sweat off of them could be detected by the actual dump, the actual like waste management people would find it and know the exact isotope and trace it back to her. And so it's like serious business. And meanwhile, all the other people in the cancer ward are grandmothers on Medicaid in New York City, in Brooklyn, and they all take public transit home. Everything they touched was radioactive for 6 months. And then I'm putting like things together, right? This is the beginning of when I started using my brain, really. I basically would always just try to get through. I always just try to be like the least slow gazelle in the herd to not get bitten by the shark. And then I was like, I'm a bass player. I'm just going to be along for the ride. You guys be in front. I'm just going to be like thump, 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 thump. It's going to be beautiful. And I was like,
while hell's breaking down, they're like, you know what? I'm really happy Matt's here. He really played a good tune while everything was falling apart, man. So happy he was there.
Well,
as the lion's like tearing apart another gazelle, you're just like, keep running. I got my guitar here. Keep going. Keep a good pace, Matt.
Right. I totally, that was like early, that was young Matt. I was all right. So I basically catalyzed me. I was a new father. I was a new husband, and they were trying to A, kill my wife, and then B, have me raise a child alone. Like, what? Like, that was not the equation. I'm supposed to be the bass player. You know what I mean? And so I had to like discard my entire personality. And I was like, started putting things together. Like I started engaging, being like, what's going on here? And then I asked the doctor sharp questions, and then they started stuttering, and then like would leave the room and be like, wait a second, honey, that thing that you took that was radioactive, that gave you this cancer. Did you see that doctor's reaction? And she's like crying and upset. And it's like, and not only that, all these grandmothers are going out and touching all of the public transit. And you know what I looked up? Levothyroxine, the pill that they have you on for replacing your thyroid, is the #1 pill prescribed in America. And it still is. And so it's like, oh, they exported thyroid cancer by making all the ablation like kills the thyroid. And so if you get touched by that radioactive material, it will attack your thyroid, and then you will need levothyroxine.
They're not, in a sense, they're not. It's not the direct cause of the problem, but it creates a gap for the problem to start to exist. In a sense, it's like
Well,
where they
it eats
can't
away at
connect
their
it.
thyroid. Well, it's like it's caustic, right? And so it's nuclear. It's nuclear and it's radioactive and it's caustic, and so it targets those cells, and that's why people are like always like trying to take iodine to protect themselves, right, from radiation and such.
Mhm.
This radiation targets the specific cells and destroys them. So everyone would get hypothyroidism or hypothyroidism from it attacking their thyroid.
After taking it.
Yeah, and that exactly. And then eventually it eats it entirely, and then you have to have like replacement.
You're for the rest of your life, you're on their thyroid medication.
Yeah, you're on thyroid replacement medication, and that stuff you can get allergic to it, and then you switch to the pig thyroid, and then you get allergic to that, and you switch back. It's awful because every time you switch, it's like, and so basically what happened was I figured out like, don't trust doctors.
Mhm.
And that's like a bold thing, especially in the post 2020 world to say, right? And I basically decided that the only way we could stop cancers from coming back, because they kept coming back, was to stop the nuclear testing, because I figured out that the way they test to see if you have cancerous cells is to make you radioactive again, which increases your cancer chances again.
Mm.
And so I was like, this is bogus.
Because it shuts down your immune system.
Yeah. And it also like, it screws up. I mean, it would have to screw up like the way our cell membranes work.
Right.
Isn't it those interesting subtleties where you kind of, they tell you something, instead of your head going up and down, like, okay, let's do it because I'm so scared. Your head kind of goes to the left or right, and you're like, wait, hold on here. Wait, hold on.
Mhm.
Let me re-explain what I just heard. And is this correct? And then after you re-explain it, they fill up that whole next line with a whole bunch of medical jargon. And then you're trying to confuse you or dupe you. And just to go along with it. And it's just, I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about. And please continue. I'm sorry. Please.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because it's a painful thing. It's like one of those things where you're like, you want to like start like freaking out, but we're all in a hospital, we're all in a doctor's office, and like everyone's got to like play nice, and you're like, oh.
And who's your wife trust? Does she trust you? Does she trust the doctor?
Depends on the year.
And the stress
Right.
too. The stress too that's also on your shoulders, where you're like, honey, I think we should go in this direction, and if she goes in that direction and it doesn't work out, then the guilt or the shame, the guilt that could be on your shoulders if it gets worse, right? No, please continue, but I'm just thinking about that time period of yours.
Yeah.
I'm happy it worked out.
Yeah. And I mean, she still, sometimes gets like the lesser form of skin cancer, but it's been it's been many years now. But
could I send you some trace minerals
sure,
she can add in the water? I bet you anything she might get a little bit of a detox experience for the first 10 days. But we'll use a little less, like a smaller amount initially to clean the water, but it cleans water, all tap water, and it adds 64 plus ionic sulfate trace minerals to the water. So I bet you anything it will, after about a month, I think she'll see a positive effect on it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no,
energy is her biggest thing, and cleansing is difficult. Yeah, I'm not gonna I'll let her thing be her thing.
Yeah,
but like so basically what happened was we had to we did the Gerson therapy at first. We did the juicing, and that's like a circus of juice and enemas.
Yeah.
And so like I was the person making them all, and then like 2 years into it of doing it for 2 years straight, I kind of had like a nervous breakdown, because I was just like, I was on a merry-go-round that never stopped. because you do 8 juices a day.
It's a
and you
lot
clean
juicing. The gerson therapy is no joke.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's all day, all night, and
You're
a lot
hearing
of
the
people,
juicer when you're trying to go to sleep at night. You hear it in your head.
and they want you to have fresh juice, fresh vegetables. And where do you actually get good vegetables from nowadays? Or you know what I mean?
and
So
then
it's
in
like,
winter.
I know,
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about. Please continue, but I get it.
yeah, and so we had all these issues, and we were like, does it like in the middle of winter, how do we do the gerson therapy? And then we were always poor, and I was living, we were all living in the garage of her grandparents, like wood shop. And so it was like really, really hard. And permaculture was the thing that gave me hope and clarity and allowed me to grow food in abundance. And then it was 140-degree soils, and I was able to grow, and people like who are generational farmers would come over to my gardens and be like, how are you doing this? And I was like, Sepp Holzer, Masanobu Fukuoka, Jeff Lawton, Elaine Ingham. And like, I just was combining everything just like we all do. And it just was in an extreme environment. And I had a lot of like issues to work out, you might say. So I'm like out there digging swales, you know, and it's like, it's going to work out. It's going to work out, you know. And then like I look up 2-3 years into that, and I've become a really good teacher, and I know that because I can see the success in my students, and I love it. It's like who I am. It's changed me. And then at the same time, I became really good at seed saving, plant breeding. I was able to adapt Peruvian corn that was apparently impossible to adapt to North America before me. Though Baker Creek was selling the seeds at the time. They were from Joseph Simcox. Remember that crazy guy, the plant explorer, botanical explorer guy? He's nuts, but we love him nonetheless. But like the seeds he brought were crazy. And I didn't realize that no one had figured it out, but I understood the science behind it. They were photoperiodic. And so I put it on the dark side of a hill in California under an oak tree. And because it was from like 9,000 feet and I was only at 2,000, it freaked out pressure wise, water wise. So instead of growing 9 feet, it grew 16, 17, like something like that feet tall. And it like formed crowns on top, like a crown of tassels and a crown with a crown of ears on top, like the original way that it grew. So instead of like there being like all of the there was like 6 in a row on top. And so it was like bowing it. So yeah, it was like really bizarre. The second year, it shortened its growth cycle by 30 days.
It was really adjusting its DNA to acclimate itself to the climate.
It was nuts though. I was like, corn is so adaptable. Like I got to see like it like respond to me like a being. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like you understood me finally under the oak tree. Here we go.
Right? It's really fascinating. And so I just like found this like success in this and felt so much peace and confidence. And then I took a PDC and I asked Jeff Lawton if I could turn it into an actual book for kids. And what I did was I turned the full PDC into 8th grade language, and then all the adults bought it. And I was like, and then I did a kids course and all the adults took it. And I was like, And it's because the reading level thing. When we sum things up in a way that's like 8th grade level of understanding, that's actually the New York Times reading level.
Well, me and Mark even talk about that. Like when we're researching stuff, like we're like, dude, there's sometimes we just have to sift through a lot of these paragraphs just to get to the body of what this was saying, because there's so much referencing of stuff and just language and stuff that I've never been exposed to necessarily. So like when you break it down, it does encourage that learning like that.
Yeah, all my best videos have always been like I'll research the topic or trying to answer a question to the best of my ability, where it gives new insight into the the question, right?
Yeah.
That's more than just you can type the question into Google and it's going to give you 25 pages, all of them all copied off of the same person that from the first thing, right? But you get down to, you know, page 3 or 4 or 5, and you'll find this white paper that's 20 pages long that has site references all the way throughout the whole thing, so it's almost impossible to read. And then you finally find that little tiny golden nugget that where you're just like, and I don't even know half the time if that piece of information is like so significant, but it was just the time it took to find something new, right? And it became significant. But it was kind of in a sense going back to also that corn that you're growing, right? It's like being in a situation where this corn is being grown naturally in some part of the world for whatever reason, in certain areas where people are like, wow, this corn's great, it tastes amazing. And then they have seeds, they bring it over to you, and then it's a re-engineering self-discovery process where it's like, okay, I popped the seed, it started to grow, but why doesn't it flower? And then everyone does the same thing. They pop the seed, why doesn't it grow? They pop the seed, why doesn't it grow? Pop the seed, why doesn't it grow? Right? And so they don't change anything. They keep in the same rhythmic cycle, but it takes, you know, a farmer or a gardener that at times isn't around a community where the community is going to tell them that you shouldn't do it, and then you end up just doing it, just like, you know what, there's some space over there, I'm just gonna go put them over there and see. And you don't even do it, you just do it by accident sometimes, but then you're like, holy shit, it grew 16 feet, what is going on? And you're like, and like you said, it's like, oh, it's photosensitive, you know, it's like it's sensitive to the light cycles. And David and I have had a lot of conversations actually around, I'm a big proponent of the sun. You know, I follow the sun cycles and the moon cycles. I'm like, I have a whole nother belief structure around our world where we live, and we won't get into it now, but I genuinely do think that a lot of the crops, and this is a personal hypothesis, but I think a lot of the crops that have been commercialized, or commercialized in some reason, deal a lot with not just the simplicity of growing it in for the masses, but also because if people stop paying attention to the sun and light cycles. And I think that's important. Just go ahead.
I couldn't agree more. So when I was talking about launching the RSoil database, making it open for everyone, I talked about the fact that if everyone's dating their sampling, if everyone is actually like if we're able to map things and the bricks and the bionutrient meter readings, all those kinds of things to the moon cycles, we're going to see behaviors just like the tides in the microbes. Yeah. And then someone earlier this week on a podcast was telling me that getting rid of parasites from the body, you actually do it at a certain time period in the moon cycle.
Yep.
And
yeah,
and parasitic worms are nematodes. So it's like, so they would be affected in the soil. And so that means like, there's a reason why we have a moon. There's a reason why the moon's important. And mapping those caveats, conditions, and behaviors out not only vets it, but it empowers us to partner and to improvise and understand. And that goes back to the first part of what you were saying, which I value so much because it's part of Bloom's taxonomy of cognition, which is, someone recently asked me about like how I do my marketing, how I do my like Kickstarters and everything. And it's like, it goes back to like best practices and the way the brain works. And so like fluency is what you're after when you're like, I have to read through all these things and develop like a deeper understanding, but it's actually fluency that we want, because from there we can actually scale it. If you understand something from a fluent perspective, just like my son James is fluent in music, and now he can like, he knows like the letters for things. He can tell you what chord is it if he really cares. But like no one taught him any of that. Right. Like he just like in the past year or two, he's just like worked with people and they've said things and he's like, oh, you mean like this? And you're like, yeah. And he's like, He has his own patterns. He's fluent. He can play any genre of music. And so when we're fluent in a subject, we can go micro to macro. We can go big picture to small picture. And then we could do novel applications, which is the next level. Like you apply it and then you start playing with it. And then from those places to be able to critique it only comes after you can play with it. So to go through those levels, we have to like read these things through and then get it down to that level in order to really express new ideas and new thoughts about them and to communicate those ideas to others. And so that's why I like really value the transparency of setting up this database, the Our Soil database, so that like you're like, oh, I think I've got a fungal feeder, nematode, or bacteria or whatever, and you type that in and your picture is here, and then it pulls up all the pictures in the community, but they're ranked by interpretation. So like the best top one is going to be the one that the community feels like is absolutely a fungal feeder. It's a 5 out of 5. And then there's like 30 of those, or would be amazing 300 of those. But like the point is that like the 4 stars, the 3 stars, like no one would ever even look at those. And then those people who put those and see that interpretation, they're going to be, there's another ranking, like 5-star ranking on the quality of their work separately. So they're like, wow, I did a great picture. My microscope skills are solid. My sampling skills are solid. I need to do some work on my interpretation. But then someone can reinterpret your entry, and then that interpretation gets higher ranked and shows up higher in your feed when you're looking at your own samples and in the search ranking. So it's your work doesn't get held back by your interpretation if it's good work. And at the same time, we get to learn from each other in a community. Just like I really feel like the cannabis community is led in this space by being like, here's my results. Here's what I did. What do you guys do? And then that's allowed for discernment of good, better, and best to form. And that only happens in the light of day. So that's what I'm trying to do.
You said a number of things already on the conversation. From initially, you just want to be a bass player and your influence just being your grandmother, right? And not really even being in the environment, which is something we kind of say all the time about, who's farming nowadays, right? You got the grandmas, the grandpas, you have the urban half-acre farms, that are going out of business every year, because they don't have proper business management practices. You have the cannabis farmers, right? Or I'll put them last, but then you have the big commercialized farmers where they're, 2% of the farmers or even less that are growing 98% of the food for the world, pretty much, right? And tell me if these statistics are wrong. And then you have the cannabis farmers, right? And the cannabis farmers are the ones that for the last 20, 30 years that actually had the margins to figure out, their problem solving, right? It's like, okay, I just screwed up. I barely got in a harvest, but I have enough profit to actually go to replant. And for anyone that wants to get into agriculture, there's that margin isn't there for that learning cycle or learning curve, right? And so if they don't become successful in the first 1 or 2 cycles, they got to go on to something else or go back to their job. And that's where I do think that the cannabis farmers will end up taking over. It's the only thing that makes sense to me logically, where there's a displacement of the large corporations. They own all this land, but there's no real knowledge in the upper board of directors, right? So there's a disconnection between the farm, the food, and the board of the directors. And who is going to remake that connection? That's going to be able to take a step back in and understand and make the reconnections that have been getting lost on the why behind doing certain processes, instead of them just being this routine process that people just do and they forget why they even did it in the first place. I think the cannabis farmers will be able to come back in, visually see what's going on, and reconnect the corporations with the why behind what they're doing and why they're doing it. And so that's my theory, my thought process. It's the only people I can see actually doing the work and staying in the practice long enough to be able to be put in that position possibly one day. So
wow. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it goes back to the whole idea that we're kind of like sensors for the community and for the regenerative, will of nature. And it's like when we have the ability to develop a feedback loop and then reflect upon that feedback loop, like to be able to test and then try again. And especially because of the way that cannabis cultivators have control, usually have control over their soil, over their lights. It has allowed them to really focus and say what's true, what's not true, what works. And I think that for me, this is the linchpin. And so I got pulled into the soil side of it through permaculture. So I was teaching permaculture. I applied all my teaching skills. And so I was doing peer-reviewed, fully cited textbooks with teachers' guides that were aligned to national standards for science so that it could be used in schools. And that's why my permaculture program was the first to be ever accredited by a government body in North America. And so high school kids could get like triple science credit to actually take a PDC.
College accredited courses in high school. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like that's like was like my strength. And then people started like I got really close with Elaine Ingham, and she taught me a lot one-on-one. And then people just wanted me to do more on soil. And I was getting aware of John Kemp's work. And it's every single thing relies upon the soil. And like you were talking about grounding, I had this realization this week. I don't know if you saw that video, but the fact that as we lose carbon from the soil, as we till, we're oxidizing the soil, which means that we're losing oxygen from the environment, from the atmosphere, right? And it also means that we're losing the carbon from the soil. The carbon, the organic matter, is what's holding all those protons. So it's negatively charged. I mean, that's the only way for it to hold positives like cations. It would have to be negatively charged. So we're losing the actual like amount of negative charge that's in the soil. And like a battery or like fourth phase water, because you talked to our friend Jerry, right?
Yep.
That the sun drives it wider and wider. So the energy makes the not only the exclusion zone expands, but it clarifies. So it's a filter. So our atmosphere is getting dirtier and dirtier as we lose more and more soil, and we're losing oxygen out of the atmosphere, and the atmosphere is shrinking all at the same time. And they're saying like the CO2 is contracting the atmosphere, but we're also leaking O2 and they don't know why. I actually think that we're losing the strength of the positive charge of the atmosphere.
Do you think it because the poles could be getting ready to turn?
I think that's why they're letting loose. I think the poles have actually let loose because of the death of the soil. And I think that's why we see every time there's a catastrophe that happens, there's a flip. So people are like, the flip happened and the catastrophe happened right after the flip. And so everyone's like, the flip's going to happen and everything's going to go disastrous. It's like, actually, no. What happened was something disastrous happened, like a comet hit us and then caused a dust bowl to happen and killed the soil, killed the plants. And then because of that, we lost the charge or the equilibrium or something between the sky and the earth.
Have you? I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, I'm following you.
I've been looking into this. I basically went through it and I like strongman my argument like on video this week, and then like opened it up, was like, what do you guys think? Because the reality is already they're saying CO2 is the reason for the atmosphere shrinking. They say it's contracting, but I actually think it's more like it's letting its charge go. And so that's why there's things leaking.
Have you ever heard of circuit Victor Schoberger's work?
Yeah, the water.
So have you ever? Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't study it enough to understand it.
Well, maybe we'll get lucky. Have you ever seen? It's a very specific, spontaneous event that happens in nature all the time, where tide pools form in lakes, and they reverse the water from the bottom to the top, and the top to the bottom, where they'll suck down entire trees down to the bottom of the lake, and it's the way how the lakes repurify themselves in exchange for the water. Have you ever seen those?
No, but that's definitely magnetic, right? That's
Well, have you ever heard of liquefaction?
no.
Okay, so liquefaction is this is what happens on land when all the sand molecules begin to vibrate and shake, and everything begins to sink down. And it's just a very similar experience because it's water. And I'm just giving you some connections where if you looked at the Vigor Schoenbergers and how water purifies itself and exchanges from the bottom to the top by creating a whirlpool, and then you said something of where you guys both were. I've magnetic poles changing and flipping, and it's always been there as a thought in the back of my head, and I've reviewed a lot of that information behind it, but it's also like, come on, like what is there is these parts of history where I have to connect it. I have been waiting for the connection to validate it. And when you guys talked about poles flipping, I've been imagining the whole world flipping, right? Like the whole, but now I'm imagining more of a smaller experience, like a liquefaction process happening where like a large earthquake or something happens where liquefaction is quicksand.
Yeah.
It's quicksand. It's just and you go to the beach and you stomp on the water a whole bunch. Your feet are going to begin to sink. We just aren't used to this because we think we're in the desert and everything's dried up. But we don't realize how much water is right underneath our feet. At different areas, different times. So it's just as you were speaking, I thought I just had a little connection there, and I wanted to share that with you.
So I watched Seeker, and they were talking about boreholes. Seeker, that Science Channel. They're good. They cite everything, and they said that the deepest boreholes in
8 miles,
right. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
they found
Russia.
diamondized water, and then it was living, had bacteria and fungi in it. So that means like they're not finding magma. They're not finding like this molten core. They're instead finding living diamondized hot water.
Yeah.
Which is so crazy. And that would make us much more sensitive to the sun, I think. If this world is like really like like a giant water droplet.
Yeah, totally. That'd be interesting.
With an organic lens on top, and because we guess that it's an iron core. We don't really know.
No.
Or iron nickel core.
I think it's so stupid. They know what our core is, and they know what our core is, but the deepest hole they've ever dug was like 7.5 miles in Russia. And then at the same time, they can tell us exactly what planets look like light years away. But they've never dug a dart deeper than 7.2 or 7.5 miles. And I'm just like, hold on, I'll figure it out myself, guys.
But this is why I think we have so many conspiracy theories, because they're like, there's so many weird rules, and they seem like arbitrary. They seem bureaucratic. They seem defensive. And then when we open up the door to science, there's so like real science where we're actually sharing and talking about these things. And people like James Francis White, like Dr. White, he is showing us point by point how we can replicate his work. And that's one of the things I'm going to be doing in my course for the microscopy, is I'm going to be walking through. There's like 2 more stains I have to get. There's like 9 different ones that you need to do each step to show rhizophagy in action. But it's like that kind of self-verification is real science.
Right.
And the replicate, the fact that you and I can all replicate it, that's like, that to me is real.
See, and that's where I'm trying to figure out like where the disconnect comes from the community, especially with Dr. James White's stuff. And me and Mark were talking, I'm like, I think it comes when people try to capitalize off of someone's knowledge to make a shit ton of money. And so like how I view it's like when you bring up easy water and you bring up 4th phase water, you have people like all about wanting to talk about it and further their understanding. And then you got the other side that's just totally like voodoo, made up, super science, like bullshit, this. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, there's replications, and I'm following his science. I'm trying to understand as much as I can. And I'm thinking like I just draw my own conclusion because there's these machines, there's this, there's that. So where is that disconnect where some believe, but like especially with 4th phase, it's like on the other end where some people are just like, what the heck?
Yeah. So if you look a little, if you start digging into synonyms and like try to find another way of describing what his research is, you'll find there's a ton of people that have renamed easy water, exclusion zone water, and come up with their own description for what's happening. Because it's like, I have not seen an image showing the alignment of the molecules. You know what I mean?
Right.
I know that's what it shows is happening, that it creates that clarity field, and then they have to structure somehow, right, to create that. But I mean, and the explanations are like, oh, well, you're just saying it differently. And that's the motivation of, I want to have credit come to me, and I want my published journal to credit me. And it's, there's just some petty like crap and it's not abnormal in the scientific community, is the unfortunate thing.
Right.
It's actually normal.
That's what everything like I've ever researched and looked up. There's always scientists and people that they've been put down, they've been shunned, they've been kicked out of the communities, and then they pass away, and 2 years later, like, oh my God, he was right the whole time. And then we do another breakthrough. You know, that seems like the progression of science and scientists and what we currently understand. We're just so determined, we know, and it's just like,
but the reverse is true for community-based solutions and community-based work. Like, so let's flip it to like something completely unrelated. Let's look at the rock climbing community. Remember that guy who like chiseled and then like put like handholds into like El Capo, and then like there was like
pissed off at him, right?
Everyone in the community was like, you are no, and they like they basically cancel cultured him hard before anyone had cell phones. And it was because it was a community-based thing. Rock climbing is all about community. It's all about reputation and integrity. That's the way all communities used to be, because you get found out in that community of 60, 150 people. Everyone knows it forever, and they just call you like whatever joke name is associated with that mistake, right? Like, oh, that's the blah blah blah, right? And so it's like
it does 100%,
right?
In all communities, it doesn't matter how elite you think it. Like, okay, I'm in a group of the most elite ever. Like, we are ready to work, we're ready to save the world, we're ready to, and in those community of 400, you still need a pecking order of 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. And it's incredibly ridiculous. Can't wait, we're all the best here. Let's just now collectively work on the project. And help spread the word and help educate each other and your children and the community, and we all benefit from it. Like, high five. You said something too, also going back with the carbon layer, right? And we're also talking about us, everyone's saying it slightly differently, and and reconnecting also a little bit with what you're saying. Just when we lose that carbon layer, we lose the ability to hold on to the trace minerals. And I think that's where I try to explain. I try to keep it as short and simple as possible. I'm like, guys, the humic layer is like this net, right? It's like you, just like how you're trying to extract hash, right? Where you have 25 micron net, then you have like a 75 micron net, 100 micron net, right? A 220 type micron net, and as you go lower and lower, it's the higher quality, right? But things are slipping through that net. Well, it's the same thing with this carbon layer. You get rid of this carbon layer, it cannot hold on to it. And these trace minerals sometimes are so tiny that if you don't have a strong electrical conductivity of a bacteria system, I mean, you see those fungal colonies, right? Those fungal colonies are so webbed that you just don't need a net, but you also need an electrical charge going through that net to catch on to these trace minerals. Because they're just so small and so tiny.
Yeah, and so going to that, like, and the only way that we get the organic matter to release those nutrients that they're holding is the plants are bombarding them with protons, H+, or the microbes are. And so and so in other words, those things are being loaded constantly with electrons. So they're batteries. So all the potential and movement, like the fourth phase water effect, that gets amplified. And so this is how microbes are zipping kilometers, like carrying nutrients inside themselves. People are like, how does this nutrient come from so far away? It's like, well, it's like a maglev train and it's zipping along it. And rhizophagy works in a very particular way. It eats that microbe and destroys it, or it grazes it and shaves it, and it leaks some of that nutrient and then repopulates it at a root hair. And then it populates more and more, and then it's freely living in the soil, and then roots intersect like you're talking about. And well, they come close enough to each other that those root exudates can then repopulate at another root tip. So there's this effect that starts to build, and this momentum that starts to build. And it's that charge potential that is missing everywhere. And it's just like the microbes. We didn't even know these things were inside the plants because all the soils were tilled to death, fumigated to death, and the plants were sterilized, the seeds were sterilized, and then organic had to start for a while in order for it to actually develop good soils, and then for us to even see these things.
Right.
So we're just beginning, I think that's why this is so important, that we make it transparent and we empower people to be fluent in looking at their soil, in understanding their soil, in planting and in growing, because we're just beginning. I feel like in a generation from now, we're going to be younger than our parents were. And I know that people are saying we're aging faster and all that stuff, but actually there's a biohacking revolution happening right now. And cannabis is a huge part of that. And so I think that we're going to be a generation from now, we're all going to be still active. We're all going to be still involved, and we're going to be heralding in a completely new way of life, because that community way of thinking and knowledge is going to iterate out, and it's self-correction. It's like that sensor organ, but on a community level. It's that mycelium being like, oh, we're going to adapt here and we're going to adapt here. And each of those adaptations is a tiny filament, which is a person. And that person's like, oh, well, I'm here in this community of 400 experts, but I feel like drawn to like studying like blue methylene. And then you become the expert in like blue methylene, or you become the, you know what I mean? And that differentiation, that good, better, best discernment, all those kinds of things happen naturally. And it gives me hope for the future. I mean, there's so much uncertainty. It feels like we're the driver's asleep at the wheel and we're like in the back car of the train. And we got to make our way up to the front and like hit the brakes on certain things. But at the same time, like everything's growing. Like we've never had this kind of understanding and connection and ability to show transparently what is real. Right.
It's about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, probably maybe three months ago now. Dave and I were talking. We kind of had a small, and I don't know how true this is. I got to ask someone smarter than me, of course. I'll share this with you. Tell me if you know anything about it. But we were enzymatic production, and we're talking about temperature around 86 degrees. Supposedly enzymatic production begins to slow down because of bacterias. And anything I'm saying, please correct me for anything I'm saying. But at that same time period, we also started to learn that calcium also picks up additional electrons as it gets warmer. And I started to realize, like, wow, okay, so calcium begins to settle to the bottom of the plant when it gets warmer. Is it also because when it's picking up these additional electrons, the density of calcium is getting heavier, right? And so the electrical charge can't continue up the xylem, because it's not just because of the temperature, but because of the actual weight of the molecule.
And the way that's transported is through that maglev, differential. And so it would screw it up because it's not the right. So John Kemp talks about the charges on each element as like keys, like if you're playing a Zelda game, like every single like thing is a different key for a different lock in each cycle. And so if it's too heavy with electrons, it won't do what's necessary. Or if it's too oxidized and lacking in electrons, then it's not going to do what we want either. That's why he's all about like that chelated form of molybdenum as a foliar spray.
See, I knew it, Mark. Told you.
Yeah, I was actually wondering about that. I wanted to say something to get a conversation with him and ask him, because we
were talking to Ozidia guys, and they're like, yeah, Mark was questioning it. And I was like, well, one, from my research, it doesn't oxidize, so it won't corrode irrigation lines. And probably because John is so about redox that form doesn't oxidize for a foliar spray. So when you do it, it stays in that remain form to be used by the plant, not oxidized. I knew it.
Well, I was wondering too, like, why doesn't he use sulfate molybdenum? You know, which is and sometimes I wonder, and this, see, our family comes from 40 years of big ag, and a lot of times the people using fertilizers or using chemicals or using anything, pesticides, fungicides, anything, it is because of their world of what they know, that their buddy that's a salesman, that, oh, I have a problem, and someone goes and looks for a solution for them, and it works, and so they hold on to that. Yeah, I was just kind of wondering. There's a couple questions. One of these days, I was just, because I push a sulfated molybdenum process, and I'll send it out to you if it's okay with you. Maybe you could play around with it, because I also had another question with you. One of your most recent videos about microbial count when you put them all underneath the microscope. I was actually wanting to talk to you about your results with that video. I thought that was so interesting. And then also want to talk to you about, have you, underneath the microscope, ever been able to identify if there were more trace minerals available in the environment? Does the colony of bacteria expand to a larger amount, or are you able to actually see enzymes that are produced underneath the microscope? If there's, or like, can you identify the types of enzymes that are produced? If
it's the protein, I think,
no, you can't see the enzymes.
So how do you, so I've been for over 10 years of my life, because of the work I've been doing personally on the ag side, I've been trying to get a better efficient way of validating the results, right, of certain products. And so for me, over the last 10 years, I've used terpene profiles to validate whether the process was better or not. And if I had a larger terpene profile, then that means that the plant was healthier. The plant was healthier is because the bacteria and all the minerals were in the environment for enzymatic production to happen. And so I've used terpene profiles in testing to validate that thought process. But now that I wanted to ask you was there a way to actually identify the types of enzymes, or know how much production is being done when you're combining the minerals and the bacteria together? Because that's the bloom, right? This is the mom and dad, and the babies are the enzymes, in a sense. Can we measure how many babies are made with that?
I mean, you can see the actions of these things, but they're so small. And the thing is, the light microscopy is the thing that is really annoying online, is that they show things that aren't real. And so they're selling people like 2,500 like magnification, and that's just silly, because 1,000x is as far as you can go. You can do stains, and you can do like things to identify, to like categorize bacteria, but you can't ID. I mean, pathogenic E. coli is nondescript. It's bacilli shaped. So you can't and there's like some stains for identifying some, but there's like 12 different pathogens, and then there's millions of species of E. coli. And it very much looks like E. coli is just taking up genes from the pathogenic environment from the past, because 40% of every soil, 40% of all the compost seems to be just fragments of old DNA that influences everything. Yeah. So
That's fascinating what you just said there.
yeah. So
About the
there's like
old-
these
most of it being old
limitations.
fragments, and then just like attaching to the old information and continuing and furthering, but at the same time doing something different.
Sounds like Emoto's work with water a little bit, like they're cloning their previous experience so that it's making it easier for new things to exist or take hold. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, horizontal gene transfer is three things. It's viruses, gene gets transferred, and then it's conjugation. The microbes have sex, and they actually form little microphalluses, and they move really, really fast against each other. And so it's like quite obvious. They're like tiny little rabbits.
Right.
And the phalluses spread, and then suddenly the whole field of vision is filled with little vibrating microbes that are instantaneously exchanging DNA with each other. And so it looks sexual, but it's actually them reaching in and grabbing DNA out of the other microbe, and then the other one doing the same thing and injecting and pulling out at the same time. So they're exchanging DNA. And so it's not really sexual. It looks that way, sure, but it's really fascinating. And so when we do anything, the microbes are like reacting instantly. And that's like hard for our brains to wrap like around. And so there's a lot of things that have been created and a lot of assumptions that have been made around microscopes. There's only been 0.01 nematodes identified at all.
Wow.
So the idea that we could like go
I think
under
I
the
know two currently. I think I know two of that. So
it sounds like the microbes are
the ones that infect roots and the ones that we say are good.
It sounds like the microbes are going through phase change to harmonize themselves, and through that phase change like they're in a sense becoming the same frequency to allow things to cross over.
Yeah, I wonder if there's an actual resonance to their like their actual movement.
I was wondering the same thing. I was like, it's very interesting where you I was thinking the same exact thing.
And it's similar to like how trees, like they're like where they're testing like putting specific like carbon-19 and then finding it that it's in the sapling 20 feet away the next day and stuff like that. But then at the same time, they're finding like that mother tree, the host, that mother could also suppress that baby and be like, okay, times are hard, the atmosphere is like shit, we're killing you off and we're trying to survive, so there's like this adaptation, like you're saying, Mark, of like residency, harmonancy, like a change and shifts through the cycles, and they're equally all just connected into that same power source, and the fungi are transferring that same information to the other saplings and vice versa. And that's what I found fascinating. It was like how fast when they're isolating, I think it was like carbon-19, they would isolate it, put that in there, and then it'd be like in that tree. And they're like, well, are they deciding? How are they doing that? Like, why is it more in the sapling and why not over this one? And literally mapping out forest floors now, those humic layers. And it's, oh my God. And like you were saying before, this is all new. Like we're just barely scratching the surface. Like those discoveries, there's old, knowledge behind it, but those connections that we're making now and how in depth it's going, it just keeps me wanting to keep going and learning.
Yeah. And there's like a new way of testing DNA called nanopore technology that actually reads it like a barcode. It splits it and then has guide proteins guide it through these nanopores, and it reads it like without PCR, without culturing. And that's what I've been using, but it's opened up a whole other door of questions. Like, I know someone who, remember I was talking about the speed at which the microbes move. I was working with someone, William Padilla Brown. He was telling me that he sequenced a purified culture of a mushroom, and it read as bacteria. And it's like, oh, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Isn't that starts with, does it start with an A, the name of it, or no? Because isn't there a bacteria that we commonly miss? We always think we think it's fungi. I can look that up.
Well, you said something there that I thought was interesting, because I've always, and this is me because I'm not, I don't want to say I'm not properly educated. I know I am, but still I haven't went into depth in each of these areas to understand, like, well, why did they start, where did this classification of bacteria or fungi come from? And it's like what you just said right there, it's like, why are, like, where did this separation come from, where we started to call bacteria and fungi, and why are they separate? Why are they actually classified as a fungi and a bacteria? And I do understand some people say it's called like single cell, and they have different classifications, and this is why this is, and that's why that is, and different things. But like what you just said, what was interesting right there is like, this should be a fungi, but it's a bacteria. And so is this where these links where it evolved, right? Where it's,
well, then
like,
you have lichen too,
yeah,
which is that's like a
lichens,
combination of them, right? That's what they're finding.
But in decomposition, in decomposition, as these living things break down, and the DNA, because DNA theoretically can last up to millions of years, is the DNA then that happens to overlap with the bacteria influencing the bacteria as it breaks down, or is it becoming bacteria?
totally.
Like there's some weird, and I know sterilizing things certainly changes things, but like, we're not really good at tracking really fine things that happen. And so this is why we need a lot more testing, because it seems like everything is influenced by everything. And the closer we look, we figure out it's like, oh yeah, no, it's totally breaking down this way, but it's also doing this. It's also doing this. And it's these stacked realities that we live in that, I mean, it speaks to the fact that we can only see a certain number of wavelengths, right?
Absolutely.
And then outside of that, we can't see it, but that stuff exists. There's so much in life that's like that. And I think, like, going, like, in my book, I went for each element, I went down to the actual, like, history of it. So this is potassium, potash, the ashes, then being boiled down, and alkali being the word originally associated with potash, where the term alkaline comes from. And it's like, when we know the progression of how we discovered these things, how we came to understand them, it's sometimes shocking how like superstitious or dumb the original like assumption was. And you're like, wait a second, the original virus was the tobacco, like, mosaic virus, and your experiment was to rub nitrate salts on the leaves until it got damaged, and then once it was damaged, to reduce the whole plant and the nitrate salts into new nitrate salts, and then rub them on other plants with no control. I was like, this is the weirdest, awful experiment I've ever heard of. And then they found something in those salts, and that something was a virus. And it's like, wait, what?
Wow.
So there's so much of it like that. And the only way to, like, get out of that, I think, is to do what so many communities are doing now, which is to show their work, to expose truth, and to seek what's best, openly, vulnerably. And when we do that, amazing things happen.
It's here. I found that bacteria. I was thinking of actinobacteria.
Actinobacteria,
Yeah.
The white. It's actinobacteria used to be called actinomycetes, and it looks like false fungi.
Exactly.
And it actually inhibits fungi from growing, so it's not good.
Oh, that's interesting.
In a small amount, it's good because it's always there, but when it dominates your soil in an alkaline condition, it reinforces the alkaline oxidized condition staying in place. So, like, you'll find, like, actinobacteria, like, dominating, like, California soil gardens, and so that's why they grow amaranth really well and Swiss chard really well, but then, like, their blueberries are like, nah.
Well, see, now that has me thinking, because the reason I originally went down this research of all these bacteria is for this one, this was an EM1, which I'm currently testing and trying different things with, fermenting and going down my paths of those. And one of the first things I was seeing was it was commonly misdiagnosed when they would see it. They think it was fungi, the way it looked, just, before. And then now they're like, nope, it's a bacteria. So I found that really fascinating. Because like what Mark was going back and saying, like, why did we separate them? Because then I was thinking that bacteria, yeah, we thought for a long time that was fungi, it's just, but it wasn't.
It was so crazy is it's like oomocytes are like a combination of actinobacteria and fungi. And like, that's why they occupy a different like region of the, like of either, like in the redox like cycle.
Right.
Going back to that question I had earlier, sorry, I just am really enjoying the conversation. Sometimes I enjoy listening more than anything else. So let's talk about those results. Sorry, what did you find in each of the products? And yeah, what did you find in each of them?
So what was super fascinating was this was like a lot of medium, and I was like surfing around, and then I found like a giant root section, and then I made a whole video on just that root section because it was so beautiful. It's like, I mean, inoculation glows neon green under the cyan blue light of epifluorescence, and Mike Amaranthus, the father of mycorrhizae inoculation, has always said that it's root fragments that are going to be your best bet for highest levels of inoculation. And so it was really fascinating to see that they were betting on that. Like they're all in on that. From what I saw on this, there really was like, I didn't see spores like I saw in it's over there. Like in the this other one, the one in the tub, the endo-acto one that's in a tub. That one was basically like all spores. I can grab it. Let me just grab it. It's right here.
You know what's funny, Mark, is I've always questioned what those stringy things were in mycos, and he just answered it. They're root hairs. Like,
well, the
mycos, just like, I'm sitting there like, wow, okay. I'm always thinking there's like dirt, debris. I'm like, oh, what's that little stringy thing? What are those? It's freaking root hairs. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the good stuff, and everything else is carrier.
Well, right. The mycos, they farm all their stuff in. If I remember straight, I've never been one of the processes, but I've talked to John 100 million times, and I've talked to his dad a shitload of times as well before he died. They grow it in the desert somewhere in Arizona, if I remember straight, or something like that. And I think they grow a specific plant in what you're holding, the mycos, the granular, and then they harvest the myco, they harvest the granular material, and then they ship that out to you. And so that, like you said, that stringy material, it would make sense that that's roots, because they're harvesting what the roots are lit, like surviving in, not the actual spores.
This is the process they likely are doing. This is Bahia grass, and it's easy to kill in winter. And so the medium that they use it could be a combination of things, but it's usually like 1 to 4 compost to vermiculite or biochar. And then they just harvest the actual growing medium as the inoculant, and that's what they ship everyone.
Exactly. That's mycos. I know their process. It's been explained to me a few times over the years. But yeah.
So your results, you had the one with the spores, right? You saw a lot of spores, and then going back to the mycos, what was your discovery after that, banking on the root hairs?
Well, I just know from Mike that those are going to have a higher inoculation rate. But what was really wild was to see like the endo mycorrhizae being like from bioorganics being like mostly spores. But there was like, what's wild is it's spores, but there was definitely bacteria in there. And so it was like, how are you doing this? And then
was there bacteria in the mycos? Because there shouldn't be, or at least on the label, all they do is label endo. So that's also one thing I was wondering and wanted to ask you more about was
everything had, I believe everything, if I recall correctly, everything had some bacteria in it.
Okay, and that would make sense. That would make sense.
Alone,
it's a plant they're growing. Yeah, it would make sense they have bacteria in there. And it would make sense that it's just a label. They're just putting on there what they want to sell and validate. So if they're just putting an endo, it doesn't mean that it would be void of bacteria. It just means that that's what they're putting in as what the product they're guaranteeing to their customer base.
Right. And then recharge was like a jungle. And because it's like packed with molasses,
Yeah,
it's 6% molasses. That's a lot.
it is.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I mean, this is just so full of things, but they're spores. So they're not pieces of root. So everyone else went with the spores. And I don't know how effective that is. This guy, the myco, this one didn't even work with like the trichoderma. Like I was hoping that the trichoderma would work with the brassicas, but then I heard that you have to have the specific kind of endomycorrhizae AMF. So I'm going to do more research on that, but this might just be weak because it's spores. And there's a variety of things that goes into this. I want to like actually, so the way I was doing experiments before I looked at them under the microscope was I was actually testing them on newly sprouted seeds and then looking at the root tears and the roots cross-sectioned and then the leaves. And so that's how I was seeing as the way to do it. But then the audience on YouTube asked for me to go through the actual like inoculants themselves. And so I was like, okay, I can do that. The mineral side of things, I didn't get to do that. The biochar and the rock dust, that's super boring. It's like pretty wild how boring it is. And it's like, the minerals, they don't do much, you know what I mean? And like, unless you have a polarizer and like a first wave, accessory plate, you actually can't like differentiate between the minerals. So yeah, I'm working on that right now. I'm
Especially with minerals and the way light refracts and stuff off of crystalline structures. I'm sure it's just like looking at sand, kind of, just.
And
yeah,
and we're talking about they're also the state of the mineral that it's in. Is it a rock or is it a water soluble? And I think that's also like what is actually in our water. And same thing with bacteria, is like you said, the nematodes, we've identified 0.1% of the nematodes. It's like so much is undiscovered. It's like, why, like, let's not tackle this one now because we're trying to tackle this one over here in a sense.
Yeah.
well,
So when you say just spores, like, so with mycos, they give you the root. So is that with the anticipation that root's still it's still inoculated and that's going to further help?
oh, it totally is.
So then with the spores, what is like do you know like a general, like, let's say recharge, like, is it in two, like in my mind, I use mycos. That's what I've always used. And I've stuck with that one. And I've always looked at it as probably not coming into effect for like 2 weeks later. So the inoculation, the formation, the growth from it. Is that true? Or is spores, when they come into contact with water in the soil, they get to work, like, especially like recharge, or is there like a week delay?
I definitely think that it really just depends on who we're talking about and the conditions of the soil. Just like a seed, where the seed won't sprout until the conditions are right, spores are going to do that same thing. So and
There has to be, in my mind, there has to be a time period, right? Because in what direction does the spore, in what direction do we need the spore to be activated? And that spore, in a sense, needs to have a specific environmental conditions or whatever, right? For it to be activated or to stay as a dormant. And I recently heard, where did we hear this from, Dave? It was a 24-hour process to complete enzymatic production between bacteria and fungi.
That was John Kemp talking that, in 24 hours, if you can end with the complete protein instead of leaving nitrates and stuff, then you that goes with the bug resistance. But within 24 hours, the availability of the minerals and then completing the aminos to the peptides to the complete protein. And he was saying you want complete proteins by the end of 24 hours.
So that's what I was thinking. 24 hours is that cycle, right? Like you place the bacteria or the fungi
Rip
there.
That open pretty quick. You see that? Boom.
Yeah, I know. He's like,
gotcha.
I love that. And in my mind, it's like 24 hours is the cycle in my mind. I don't know how true that is. Again, I'm not a scientist. I read and listen to you guys and immediately listen and apply, right? And in different ways. And I just always thought like, okay, you know, everything has a cycle. It needs to get started.
But-
Is that correct or incorrect?
Well, I mean, I've got damp samples of Johnson Sioux that are months and months and months old, and the spores are still there, just chilling.
They're still dormant. Exactly.
Yeah,
But
and
you
it's
haven't
damp,
introduced them.
warm soil.
Oh, so you've introduced them to the soil environment already, and they're still dormant.
Wow.
Like
Too warm?
this is Johnson Sioux, and it's like putty, like it's like clay,
Mm-hmm.
and this is just filled with spores, and they haven't sprouted yet.
Try keeping the bag open for like
Yeah,
3
that's
days?
why I was wondering the same thing. Have you tried keeping the bag open?
Oh, I don't want to like to. I want to continue to observe it.
See how
I
long
want
you
to
can
use
go
it.
for. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, they say it's got a shelf life of like over a year, and just sitting there on the shelf, it's super interesting. And what's really wild about that Johnson Sioux is there's like,
Is that
no
Johnson
back-
Sioux another product that's an endo or it's
You
a
talking
bacteria?
about the bioreactor?
it's the bioreactor.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the bioreactor. Yeah.
So this is Beam Compost from the Beam Compost company, right? And they sent me a sample, and it's like got no rhizobia in it, which is bizarre.
Why?
Well, because rhizobia is a primary component in most people's compost because they're adding animal manures. So there's no animal manure in this. All off the bat,
Right.
I can say that.
So it's like a vegan compost.
Yeah, I think it's like wood chips and like like
needles
leaf
and
litter
leaves and yeah.
or some industrial farm waste, you know. I don't know what it is, but it's so fungal. And it's all saprophytes though. And it's like, yeah, 17% of wood saprophytes are endophytes. That's cool. But it's so fascinating to have something so pure, not having the bacteria there like that, like rhizobia, which is usually everywhere. And it's
There's
just
also
being
not a root.
shelf-stable.
There's also not plants or roots in that system right now. So, you know, once again, plugging in different electrical parts into this, you know, there's the plant, where's the bacteria, you know, it even seeds, they're transferring bacteria. So when they open up, just like we do when our mothers passed on our microbiome down to their daughters, you know, so there's a similar probably composition where you're harvesting, you're creating, but at the same, you don't always get that other part of it until, you know,
There's a bioelectric exchange.
right.
I mean, they're putting out the protons as they're putting out the carbonaceous, you know, like the exudates, the cakes and cookies, right? That Elaine talks about. And that means they're humic acids, right? And so there's a catalytic, you know, catalytic effect going on. And actually, I mean, I would say that we needed to revise the whole cakes and cookies thing. Though I love Elaine. The fact that 80 to 90% of the exudation is reabsorbed and the microbes are reabsorbed with it,
Right.
and they eat the microbes and harvest them, it's more like Hansel and Gretel than just cookies.
I love Elaine, but you're a little too PG for us, Elaine. We need to go a little more on the R side.
We got to warn the children.
Yeah.
Quick question. Did you ever test by any chance the soil underneath that oak tree where the corn grew the first time, 16 feet?
You know, what happened was very early on, I moved away from that site. It was that I was in a garage, and like, that was like hard for me to be like in that small space. And also the floor was like constantly peeling. So it's like black peeling paint. We've got toddlers.
Right.
You know, just brutal. And so like I jetted out of there as soon as possible and left that site. And then the site went into disrepair. Another renter came onto the family land and didn't know how to take care of it. And
man,
it all just deteriorated. So it's a hard thing, but it's also like, it's sad because that whole area doesn't have any hope, because they've been removing all the water in the Sierra Nevadas well above the foothills. So
Right.
the foothills burning shouldn't be any surprise to anyone when they've been purposely taking away all the runoff for
Mhm.
over 50 years and then selling it after running it through
Water,
turbines.
yeah,
Yeah.
water wars, baby. It's
But same thing even with the farmers in Cali. Oh, we'll build water pumps. We'll do this. Just you have to leave the water running to fill these canals that are going 3,000 miles down. And the farmers now like, I could be conserving water. I could be doing this, but like pigeonholed by contracts of big corporations taking the water from those lands and
Did you
diverting them
guys,
thousands of miles away. It's amazing.
do you know about Tulare Lake?
No.
So Tulare,
You
the
mean in
city,
California, Tulare, California?
well, Tulare Lake was the largest body of fresh water west of the Mississippi, and it was drained by King Cotton. And they drained it and then planted that whole area. And that is a city now where the aquifer beneath it is dry. So
Oh,
it used to be this
sinking.
giant lake. And then they built a city where they drained the lake. And
Where's
then
this at?
Tulare.
Tulare, California.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The whole
okay.
area.
It's a salt patch now at this point. I drive through it
Yeah.
all the time. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I just didn't know about it, what the words you were using right there. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a
So
big salt patch.
Tulare used to be the biggest lake west of the Mississippi, freshwater, and it was duck and fishing paradise, and it would flood. And you used to be able to paddle all the way up to Sacramento from Tulare. And it was our grandparents' generation that could do this. When I was taught at NYU by this New Yorker, he remembers being a child and being able to walk across the Hudson and the East River because both were solid ice. And
Wow.
no one in
Yeah.
living memory, like my age, has ever seen anything like that. The ice flows were gone by the time we were born in the early 80s.
Even the insects too, in the going through Tulare. Like you drove through Tulare 20 years ago, your entire windshield would be packed, your whole car would be packed of insects. You drive through now, even the fog's nothing like what it used to be. I'm from Monterey, California, so it's like driving through there, Tulare, Yuma, the salad bowl, going back and forth from Monterey to Yuma and back and forth. It's like the environment has completely changed in 20 years.
Yeah, and there has to be an effect to us supercharging the environment with all these different Wi-Fi signals and EMF and all this on the insects. That's how they navigate, and that's how plants communicate too.
Right.
At least that's what John has been saying. That's at least what Phil Callahan has been saying. And they're the thing is with a lot of these guys, when they talk about the experimental stuff, and they act upon it and they get good results, it's like that's the beginning. We just have to keep going with the research and keep testing. And when we create new tests, we see new things. And every formula is a formalized experiment. And so we need to give people the actual tools and toolkit and understanding to start doing experiments and with understanding so that they can discern more. And that's really the way that we're going to move forward on all this.
Yeah, I agree.
Matt, where can people find you?
Well, I'm the permaculturestudent.com. I'm also regenerativesoilscience.com. I'm Matt Powers, the permaculture student on YouTube. And my book, Regenerative Soils, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's on sale on my site, thepermaculturestudent.com, with free shipping. I'll even sign it for you. And yeah, and I've got my biggest book, the Permaculture Student 2, the big purple book that's over 400 pages, is peer reviewed. It's free because all this stuff, like I really believe that this is a human right to know how to live in a way to make the world a better place. And that's why it's online as an audiobook on YouTube that anyone can listen to. And the ebook is also on my website as a free download. So people can check that out. And I have over 500 videos on YouTube that cover a whole bunch of things. You kind of get to see my progression from like gardening in the Central Valley above Fresno, all the way to Baker Creek with the Heirloom Seed Company, to diving deeper and deeper into the soil. And I love it. I really feel so fulfilled, and just I love this life that I have to live, and this position that I have to be able to serve so many people and to empower so many different people. And it's really exciting. And if you guys are interested in my work, please check it out, because there's a lot of free stuff I'm just giving away. And if you're farming or working with soil at all, this is the book to get. Regenerative Soil. This completely changed everything for me. I mean, this is my bestseller. This is like changed my life personally. But it's also like I see the world completely differently. I eat a completely different food now because of this. I buy completely different things now because of this. My understanding of the world completely changed. So it's something that if you're growing food, if you're working with soil, and or even if you have health challenges, it can actually provide an incredible window of understanding to apply dramatic, dynamic, adaptive change.
Just because those in my brain, one last quick question on those
Yeah.
experiments you did. Out of all the ones, which product would you can you compare each of those products you tested as being a number one to the last, or it's not really like that because the products are different?
Well, I would want to continue the experiment and then have each of them be on a plant, and then have everything controlled, same amount of light, same amount of soil, same type of soil, and then inoculate each one differently. And then I would want to bionutrient the plant, and then I would want to dig up the roots and then look at each under the microscope. And so I would want to see the inoculation rates in comparison, because it very well might be the case that the mycos, because it doesn't have to sporulate, it's going to cause the inoculation to happen much faster. And because the other ones have to form spores and then grow out and then associate, and then, that's going to take longer. And so you could and this is one of the crazy things, is that they found that a lot of the time that they would have assumed that the benefit of, I'm trying to remember the exact study. There was a benefit of something happening at the tip of the root, but what was wild was the root grew so fast that whatever benefit there would have been, it wouldn't have stayed around to receive it. And so like their theory was like, just didn't even time out. And I feel like there's like a lot of that going on, where, yeah, it associates with it. And at the end of the day, there are associations with it. But the fact that the mycos, perhaps hypothetically, well, let's say, maybe is a week, or maybe let's say like even 5 days, those 5 days at the growth start have an exponential effect with every day. You know what I mean? Because every day is critical.
100%. Every day is critical. Every day is critical.
And so being able to be inoculated earlier, even just 5 days earlier, would have a completely significant difference in, I would say probably an order of magnitude difference at least, between the plants. So that's what I would do to figure that out. I would do it that way. And then we would be able to say definitively, at least with that plant type, that soil type, right? Because there might be a pH or a mineral combination that causes those spores to pop, right? And you're like, oh, I watered it with EM, and that shock of the pH, that dip in pH worked the way it does on seeds,
Right.
And it caused them to just all sporulate. I don't know what the stressors are to release spores, and I don't know if that's actually been studied quite yet. But that's the kind of thing that I'm really excited about, because the Our Soil database. So the Kickstarter was for the second book in the series, Regenerative Soil Microscopy. And I realized the only way that I really could train the students was to allow it to be completely transparent, to put myself out there transparently too, and let us all self-regulate and become a community organism of understanding. rather than like the pyramidic structure.
Totally,
And
100%.
yeah, and it's like that's a useful structure for teaching people what I know. But as soon as you know what I know, collapse that
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
that doesn't serve any purpose. It's like a pop-up tent, right? We're like, we're there and we don't need it no more.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what's happened in so many ways in cannabis. And I really want that to happen in soil more and more, because behind the scenes, that's what's going on. I mean, Chris Trump and I, we're like texting each other all the time and like talking about like the wildest ideas. And same thing with William Padilla Brown. Same thing with James White. James White was like, you must make sure there's a place for academic papers like mine. And I'm like, you know, and it's like, it's awesome. It's all community. It's all of us sensing and feedback and contributing. And yeah, so thank you for letting me be on here and connect with you guys. It was absolutely awesome.
I had a great conversation. I really enjoyed listening. I really enjoyed listening to what you were speaking about. I mean, but since I've seen that last video, I was just like, God, I want to ask him more questions around this. And we got into a whole plethora of just starting to identify your core values and introduce that to our channel. I think that's super important. I think just understanding a farmer's and a teacher's core values, and because that's a reflection that goes into the hearts of the minds of the people you teach too, you know, and just being able to share that so that more people can gravitate to not just the politically correct information, but also information that has a heart and a soul attached to it, if that makes sense. And the right people kind of are gravitated or you know, sift to the bottom, or you know, or come to the top, whatever analogy you want to use, and there's room for them, and there's room for their opinion as we adjust and move forward. So Matt, thank you. Dave, you have anything left?
Mike, no, I don't. It was a pleasure meeting you, Matt. It was we look forward to this. I'm looking forward to accessing that one day. When is that potentially going to be launched, the database, or what's your kind of anticipation?
I hope we can get it done by February. They need me to write up a few more page designs for them to do the quote and then to start the process, and then I want us to beta test it as a community so that we refine it over 6 months of time, so that when we do release it to the public, it's so compelling, it's so powerful. We've already populated it with a lot of images and videos and tests, so that it already has embedded value in it. And I want to build these automations so that it automates counting, it automates ratios of inoculation on our roots, and it does the fungal to bacterial calculations and ratios for us. Because once we take the annoying, like tedious part out of testing, we'll test more. And if we do more tests, we'll get a holistic understanding that we just don't have today. And that will change everything.
Just think about the maps 20 years from now, potentially, what that could geographically look on a map being plotted with dots of tests, and what it, you know, and those connections and how they interact. And even like, oh, well, yeah, that tree was originally started and then North America started planting. That's not even native to North America. And did it bring bacteria? Like, that's where my mind goes, to where you're really going to see stuff that you couldn't even imagine, and then be able to learn from it, experiment from it, and then further our generations of connections with food and health.
Yeah. And to keep it transparent, open, and public, so that it is and because I know this is going to be an example that other people are going to run with in their own niche and own science. And it's going to cause this community solutions sea change. And it's going to just benefit all of our children.
And like you said, keeping it available, you know, look at even the studies with psychedelic mushrooms coming back into the medical research, and people trying to create patents on their synthetic crystalline form of psilocybin that gets you, you know, so already people are trying to put patents on stuff like that, you know, and it's like, that's not accessible. That's not, they're trying to make it to where pretty much you have to go to them, you know, and it's just like, once again, here we are, science is saying there could be potential with this fungi and depression and all this other stuff. And then companies already writing the legality to make a patent on a crystalline structure of it. It's just like, wow. That's not available to the people.
It's like the Middle Ages with the priestcrafts, right? It's like, well,
Right.
you can't read the Bible, sir. You are not a priest. And then it's like people learn to read, and we're like, the Bible doesn't say anything that this guy is talking about. And
Right.
like that's what's going on with the science. I mean, we're realizing a lot of them are practicing it as a religion, and we're like, the results don't say that,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know. And
Yeah.
so it's an incredible time to be alive, actually.
It is. Yes.
Matt, I think really that was just a great way to in this conversation is by reiterating what you said. Is they're treating science as a religion versus just going back and using their own eyes to make new observations and bring certain answers to the surface. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the channel. Guys, if you haven't checked out Matt's channel, please go over to check out Matt's channel. Please hit the like and subscribe over there and hit the notifications on his channel as well as ours for future videos that we release. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and have a great day.